Hello, everyone. Welcome to Superboy Beyond. This is Chris Jacobsen and Tom Gallagher, as always.
We're going to have some fun today. We're doing another of our Spotlight episodes, which is on Metallo. We're going to just go through all of Metallo's episodes, and we'll probably talk about his tie-in comic when we actually get to that in the comic reviews. So that's the one Metallo story from this show that we're not going to be mentioning. But today we're going to be talking about SuperMenace. So yeah, as we did on the last Metallo Spotlight episode, we're going to be going through my notes on this episode bit by bit in chronological order, talking about the things we liked, some of the things we didn't like so much, and just really focusing on this episode more so than perhaps we could with a commentary. Right. Although I'm sure we will do a commentary on this if we haven't already, but I think we already have. So yeah,
but we have talked about going back and redoing some of the commentaries. Do a rewatch on them.
Yeah, because I think when we did do the SuperMenace thing, I can't remember if I did that one with you or Sam, but it was quite a long time ago. So
it was probably with Sam because I don't remember doing it with you.
Must have been then. But anyway, just off the bat, I do think it's a bit of a shame that this is the only Red Kryptonite episode, just because. As Superman fans, who doesn't love a Red Kryptonite story,
Oh, yeah.
Especially in like the Silver Age and stuff, where it would have a different effect each time. But I mean, this is obviously the more widely known effect of Red K, I suppose, with the it turns him bad. But I do think it's a very good episode. It does open with a scene of exposition where there's a general who's telling Superboy about their experiments with kryptonite, trying to turn it into a fuel source, but also make it, not harm Superboy. It's basically just exposition, but obviously with a show with episodes as short as Superboy's, you kind of have to do it. So it's, it's not a big deal. It's just I think
there is something interesting that in regards to the general. Of course, the actor would later came back to play another character.
Who did he play later?
Season 4, A Change of Heart. He was the police officer who was interrogating Superboy after the supposed murder of Lana.
I didn't realize he ever came back, so that's interesting. I do have one note about the general, and I will just say, and you know what? It's a shame, but I can't really hold it against him. But when he's delivering the technobabble sort of techie speak at the beginning, talking about the radiation and all that, he does he fumbles his words a little bit. It's not as smooth as it is, but I mean, maybe this was his first sci-fi role or something where he had to do that. It is a skill that, it is a definite skill that you have to learn.
Or maybe that was part of his act. He's acting like a general who doesn't really know what the fuck is going on. Excuse my language.
Maybe. It could be that.
We're trying to harness the power of kryptonite. We know how dangerous kryptonite is to you. We've been working to negate the rays that are harmful to you while retaining its radioactive power.
But I don't know. It felt like something where he was just saying the words because those are what was on the script. It didn't feel like a performance, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But, it happens all the time. I know that, a lot of Star Trek actors in particular say that the technobabble is one of the hardest things to do. And there are people that can do it very well. And there's other actors who just cannot do it at all, no matter how much they practice. Right. So it is just one of those things. But moving on a little bit, though, I love that Kevin Kiner actually wrote a theme tune for Kryptonite itself that's used throughout this show. And in this episode, when the Kryptonite turns red, like the theme actually changes slightly.
Yeah,
I think it's worth mentioning because it's just a really excellent use of music. But yeah, the fact that I can't think if any other composer has actually written a theme for Kryptonite itself. He's the only one I can think of that did it. I don't know if you can think of any.
I can't think of anything offhand. I mean, there was probably something in Smallville that they might have done.
Maybe.
And
I can't remember there being a specific like music cue or like,
Yeah.
But it's possible. They might have had a sound effect or something. I think they usually had sort of like a cracking sound effect, so that when you saw his veins, it sort of went along with it.
And I know that there was no theme tune for Kryptonite in the Superman movies with Reeve.
No.
But
the first time he gets hit with Kryptonite, I don't think there's much music at all. It's just sort of like a background sort of
like a
ambient. Humming. Yeah, like a humming sound where it's almost like, when you see in a show an explosion goes off and it's almost like a flashbang and you have that high-pitched tone. It's not quite that, but it's a similar sort of feeling.
Yeah.
I think they did that very well. But yeah, Kevin Kiner, as far as I know, is the only composer to actually give Kryptonite itself a theme and to use it in such a way that when you see Red Kryptonite, the theme is different. I think that's great. I think there was another variation on the theme as well in the Bizarro episodes, but I would have to go back and watch that again. But I'm pretty sure in the Bizarro episodes, the Kryptonite theme is slightly different again. But yeah, I'd have to go back and check that. But yeah, I just think Kevin Kiner, I doubt you're watching this, but, we noticed the extra effort that you've gone to on that moment, and we appreciate it as fans. But anyway, moving on to when the Red Kryptonite first takes hold of Gerard. I do want to say that his performance when he's holding the Red Kryptonite, when he says, like,
I don't feel a thing. This is great.
Like, it's an interesting piece of performance for me. Like, sure, like Superboy would be really excited to know that, there's potentially a way to neutralize Kryptonite, but it does feel like he's just got slightly less impulse control than usual. With his emotions there. And I don't know if that's an intentional early hint as to what's actually happening, but if it was in the script and that was absolutely intended by Mike Callan and Andrew Helfer, like, well done. Like, you're showing again why it is that you had the job that you did. Because it's great. And straight away after that, Superboy like tells the general like he's sorry the experiment didn't help them turn the Kryptonite into a power source and that. And it seems like he's not bad in that moment, despite the fact that it came after the poor sort of impulse control moment. But obviously then he crushes the general's hands, so I think he's just pretending to be nice just so he can crush the general's hand because he's evil now. I wonder what you think about that.
Yeah, I definitely think that it was either him pretending or it wasn't. It was just starting to creep up, and then as he makes contact with the general's hand, starts shaking it. That's when it's like, I don't really give a damn. Crush.
Yeah. And it's great, and his performance in this moment. Okay, it's a little bit over the top and campy, but I mean that's Superboy anyway, so it fits the tone. But just the way he's like,
whoa! Guess I don't know my own strength.
Superboy, what's wrong?
Nothing's wrong.
And even the way like he makes a hole in the wall, and like as he turns back and he like points the camera, he's like,
what I should have been doing all along. Letting the world know who's in charge.
It's like it's very over the top, but in a way that just completely works for this style of show. I don't know if it would have worked in any other version of Superman, but it totally works here.
Well, I think it probably would have, because a lot of actors, when they get the, if they're playing the hero, the lead, like the Captain Kirks and the Supermans and the Batmans, they always, and they always relish the chance they get to play like an evil version of the same character. Because
just look at the episode Body Swap, like both Gerard and Sherman Howard like had a great time swapping roles for the episode. It's just a ton of fun,
Yeah. Yeah, it's very freeing for them, and a lot of them have said that, it's very freeing to play the bad guy or to play an evil version of the hero you normally play, because you're not just this very stiff wooden, I'm the hero kind of thing, you know. And I think Gerard was just letting himself go in that moment to, just relish the moment of being, this complete dick.
Yeah, and if any moment to really go a little bit over the top with your performance is justified, I think this is the moment to do it, because this is the kind of episode where you totally need that extra little thing just to take it from being a good episode to a great one. And yeah. Anyway, moving on to the next part. Obviously, the next thing we see is we cut to Clark and Andy's dorm room, and Andy is reading a newspaper, and obviously we've got the episode title is the headline for the newspaper with just SuperMenace across it. I think that's great. It's
that's
also
one of those
great
moments where Peter Griffin would say, ah, ah, ah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like that joke, I will stop you, or my name isn't Superman 4, the quest for peace. And it's just, yeah. I love moments like that when you see the episode title. But I also just want to say that it's nice that the newspaper itself is the Daily Planet.
Yeah.
I believe it's the Daily Planet Extra or something. So I don't know if that just means it's like the afternoon edition or something. I don't know what that means. We don't really have newspapers that have two different versions throughout the day in England. It's just the same paper all day.
Yeah, I mean, here on Long Island, we don't really have that. We have one newspaper, which is Newsday, and I think the only papers that do like multiple editions anymore is something like the New York Times.
Like the really big ones, I suppose.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I just never thought it was necessary, especially in these days with websites and stuff. Like, you don't need to put out another newspaper. I guess it's how they make money, though. But I just thought it's cool that it's the Daily Planet. And still talking about that newspaper, there's a really cool photo on the front of the paper where it's like talking about how Superboy is like terrorizing the city. And it's just a photo of Superboy holding a car above his head. And it's a photo that I've never seen anywhere else. I've never seen it online anywhere. Like, as far as I know, that's the only on-screen appearance of that photo, but it's a really cool image. And if anybody out there happens to have a copy of that photo, please email it to us, superboylegacy@hotmail.com. I may just have to recreate it in Photoshop at some point, who knows, but it could be fun. I just think it's cool when you see unique photos that didn't appear in other episodes.
Yeah.
I'm going to touch on this point again a bit later on, but there's some really nice touches of just the way that this episode's directed in this episode. There's a lot of little details that show that I think the director, Richard J. Lewis, was really having a lot of fun on this episode. For example, like as Clark walks into the dorm room in the scene, you literally hear one of the extras in the hallway go like, "Whoa, Clark, lighten up!" Just little things like that. It doesn't cost them anything extra, but it just shows that they were putting a little bit of effort into how they shot the scene. I don't know.
It wasn't just him walking into the room and that was it.
It easily could have been that. That there would have been nothing wrong with the scene if that's how they did it. But the fact that they put in that little bit of extra effort, I really appreciated. So
well done,
Richard
it
J.
really
Lewis.
shows that they're not just in a set. They were trying to show, they're in a dorm where there's other people.
There's more than just the 3 students at this university.
Yeah.
Other people's lives are still going on around them. And and in this scene as Clark walks in, Gerard's playing it great. Like, he's playing this sort of pissed off version of Clark really well. And I especially made note to say, like, I like that there's not a single hint of Urkel Clark in this episode, because it would have felt so out of place. So I just appreciate the fact that the writers knew not to make Clark sort of like an Urkel, like a pissed off Urkel, I guess, because they easily could have gone that route. Like, he's still trying to protect his secret identity at this point. So, he may have, Who knows how it could have been? I'm glad that they didn't do that, because I think it might have ruined it. But anyway, the General then has a plan to stop Superboy, because let's face it, no one can get it, like nobody can stop him. And like the General's thinking like Metallo is probably the only one that can stop him, like not only just purely because Metallo is like imprisoned, like he's, they have access to him, and he almost killed Superboy once. So with some military upgrades, maybe he can bring Superboy in. I like that as a plan, but I do think his team would have been better served just trying to work out exactly what the red kryptonite did to him and try to formulate an antidote of some kind. Like that would have been my first.
Yeah, remember that's us thinking, in the sense of, a reader and somebody who's not military. Remember, military men,
True.
they think one thing and one thing only. This thing is now a menace. We have to take it down. It's basically the whole Thunderbolt Ross versus the Hulk thing.
It's also Batman versus Superman. There's a 1% chance he's our enemy. We have to take it as an absolute certainty. I don't like that movie, but it's kind of an interesting line. I do think there's bits and pieces here and there they did well in that film, but I thought that was relevant.
Now, as we're talking about his plan to upgrade, Metallo, this is where part 2 of what I was saying before about something about the General comes in. When the warden at the criminally insane institute brings the General into Metallo's room, we're introduced to the General's name as well as the name of the warden, and it's Warden Ordway and General Swan.
Love it. Yep. I didn't notice that. That is a phenomenal little detail, and it's details like that is why I love this show. And like Lois and Clark did it as well to a lesser extent, but Superboy, I don't know. I think Superboy did it a little bit more often.
Yeah, and you can tell that was something that Helfer and Carlin did. They wanted to pay homage to one of the greatest Superman artists of all time, which is Kurt Swan, and of course their frequent collaborator Jerry Ordway.
Yeah. Two absolute legends,
Yep.
I know it's a funny thing especially with Kurt Swan's artwork in recent years. Like there are a load of people that just can't stand his art anymore, and I really dislike it. I think people have been spoiled a little bit by just how many quality artists there are today, and they draw their work a little bit more cinematically at times, a little bit more dynamic in the way it's framed. But when you consider just how many issues of Superman like Kurt Swan drew over his career, like he was the defining artist for a reason. Yeah. And I don't know, it just annoys me when people get...
Yeah, he was there for 30 years.
Yeah.
30 years in the same art job. The same artist on the same character for 30 years. That has to say something about the man. You know,
let's face it, like there's that story as well about how when Jack Kirby came to DC and started doing Superman's Power Jimmy Olsen, apparently the editors at DC really didn't like the way that he was drawing Superman's face. So apparently he literally just got Kurt Swan to redraw all the faces for Superman in those issues.
Well, actually, it wasn't that Kirby had him. The editors did not like it, and they...
No, that's what I said. Like, it's the editors that...
Yeah, they came...
Kirby was not happy.
Yeah, no, he was pissed.
But quite rightly.
And he didn't take it out on Kurt,
Oh, no, well, it's not his fault. He's got a job that he's been assigned. He has to do it, if he wants to get paid. It's just how it works, isn't it? But, I mean, Kurt Swan is just one of these amazing... Like, there's a reason that when, when they wrote Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, when you had, the legend himself writing that.
Yep.
It's the fact that he could have had pretty much any Superman artist that he wanted. Like he could have, I'm sure it was his choice, and he chose Kurt Swan because who are you going to get to write the Swan song to that version of Superman than the guy that drew him for 30 years? So
Yeah.
I know I've gotten a little bit off topic a little bit here, but it just annoys me a little bit when I see so many people disrespecting Kurt Swan's artwork. It's fine if he's not your personal preference, but to say that he was shit, like I've actually seen people say that he was shit, and that really pisses me off.
I would say that his artwork on Superboy, the tie-in comic, was not as good as it was, even 5 years earlier. Okay. And that could be chalked up to, maybe he's a little out of practice. Okay. Or it could be chalked up to the fact that
he may not have even been paid as much as he usually would for those, because it was quite obviously Superboy was a low budget show, so I'm guessing it was a low budget comic. Yeah. So maybe they said we can't afford to pay you quite as much for this, so don't feel you've got to spend as much time on it. So maybe he just rushed through it or something.
Yeah, I mean, the first few times he did it, like during the issues, I think it was 9 and 10 when they did the Phantom Zone. He was still Kurt Swan at Kurt Swan level, or at least it felt like that. But I think as the series went on, I think it was a lot to do with the inker, because they had an inker who was not inking him the way that some of the previous generations of inkers had done him. And I think that did him a lot of, it did him a disservice.
It's interesting you say that, because I've noticed that as well, but with different examples. It's like a lot of the time these days when they put out these compilation books, they'll take a classic piece of artwork, but they'll re-ink it like from scratch, and it'll be like the colors will be done with like modern coloring techniques and all that. I don't think it ever looks as good, because I don't think I think the artwork has to be drawn with that particular inking style in mind for it to actually work. And you see it all the time, like when they reprint books. I think even my copy of Kryptonite Nevermore is a re-inked version of that classic cover. Yeah. And it didn't need to be re-inked. You didn't need to add all this extra shading because it's iconic. You don't mess with an icon, It's,
I mean,
unless you're George Lucas,
Yeah. Yeah, on certain books when they've done it, it looks really good. On others, it's a little too garish for me.
Yeah. I think it can be done well, but I think it's about, I don't know, I think it's all about the subtlety of how well it's done. If they go a bit overboard, it feels like sometimes when they do stuff like that, they don't quite know when to stop. And it's a shame, because they're trying to modernize it, but all it's doing is just highlighting the fact that this is classic artwork that someone's fucked with. And
I mean, you wouldn't do this with the Mona Lisa.
No.
You wouldn't do this with anything by Monet. You leave the classics as they are.
And I realize I'm being a little bit, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but for me it's like, you remember a few years ago when that art restorer had that painting of Jesus, and you remember she completely fucked up the face, and it ended up looking like a weird sort of monkey. Like it literally looked like a chimpanzee by the time she was done with it. It's kind of like that for me. You take like a classic piece of art and you just kind of ruined it a little bit. It didn't need to be altered. Just print it as is, It's,
I mean, if you need to clean it up a little bit, clean it up a little bit.
Well, that's something else entirely. There's a difference between like restoring artwork and just completely giving it a whole new inking style, a whole new coloring, everything, new shading, the whole lot. It just doesn't work for me. But I can't be alone in that. I just probably get a little bit more annoyed about it than some, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, look at Kurt Swan. Alan Moore loved him. He loved him because they had such a great collaboration on Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, that when Alan Moore started working for Image / Maximum Press / Awesome Entertainment on Supreme, when he was doing Supreme, he actually called Kurt, and he said, "Kurt, I'm doing this book that is sort of an homage to the classic, Weisinger era of Superman, and I would really love it if you could come along and do some of the flashback stories, like the Kid Supreme stories, or the
Brilliant idea. If you're going to have flashbacks to like an earlier point in time, who better than Kurt Swan to draw that stuff?
And the thing is, Kurt was actually interested, and then unfortunately, just before they were about ready to start working on it, he died.
Damn.
Now, I'm not saying anything bad about Rick Veitch, because he's a great artist, and he did some of those. He did all of those flashback stories, and he was trying to emulate a lot of Kurt Swan, a lot of Al Plastino, a lot of Bob Brown.
I was just gonna say, like, if Swan was no longer around, was Plastino still around? Like, because
Plastino, he only just
I would have just got
5 years ago.
him to do it.
Yeah, but I don't.
Yeah, I would have, I would have just found someone else from that period of time.
Yeah, I don't think that
because he wasn't the only Superman.
Yeah. But he got Rick Veitch,
and I'm sure at that point he burnt enough bridges as well at DC that he couldn't just phone them up and ask them to put him in touch. They'd probably be like, "Go fuck yourself," because he didn't give a shit. So what's that? Sorry.
It all depends upon who he contacted at DC. I mean, there are some people who were on his side, but they wanted to stay low key about it.
It's fair enough. Yeah.
Granted, some of the things that DC did to him, he was justifiably pissed off.
Oh yeah, no, he definitely was. Especially some of the stuff where he talks about making sure the writers and the artists and all that get fair pay and royalties and stuff like that. I know that was part of his thing, but not the whole thing.
Yeah.
But I know Todd McFarlane was big on that for a while, but then pretty much as soon as he started making a ton of money, he started trying to rob people of their rights as well. He just did the exact same thing. I know that's why Neil Gaiman absolutely hates him. He has no respect for him.
Yeah,
I mean there was that long court case, wasn't there, about it over the rights to some of the Spawn characters that Gaiman had created.
Yeah, especially Angela.
Yeah, and it was all because Gaiman had I think he owned like a third of the rights to Miracle Man at one point, or Marvel Man.
Yes,
and he was trying to bring it back, but McFarlane also was trying to bring it back, even though all he owned was the logo.
Yeah.
It's a whole big thing. I'm sure, you know what? If you look in the video description for this episode, I'll include a link to a video that I watched about this. Brilliant channel. Go watch it. It's fascinating. Really, really cool stuff. Anyway, should we get back to SuperMenace? Yes. Because we really got off topic a little bit there for a minute.
Oh, we do that all the time.
Yeah, we do.
I think the fans do that.
Anyway, so yeah, the General is recruiting Metallo, presumably just because they know where he is and they think that they can control him, even though we know they really can't. But there's this whole cool scene in the hospital bed when Metallo's there, and Michael Callan is just brilliant as always. He's just absolutely fantastic in this scene, and I always love when Metallo looks directly into camera and addresses the audience.
Yeah, when he breaks the fourth wall.
Yeah, it like I said with something else earlier, I don't think this would work in other versions of Superman on television outside of animation, obviously.
Yeah,
but it totally fits the silver / Bronze Age tone of this show. It's just perfect tonally.
And just what he says when he looks into the camera, well, looks like I'm in the army now.
Yeah. As always, Michael Callan was just phenomenal as Metallo, and he is sorely missed. It's a shame. Obviously, he only passed away this past year. Yeah, big shame. I would have loved to have had him on the show at some point. But,
and I'm sure he would have loved to have come on.
I'm sure it's one of the he's done so many roles in his career. I'm sure this is one that he's asked about the least. So I'm sure he'd probably appreciate the fact that someone's asking about something that's a little bit more obscure, you know. But it really shouldn't. But this show shouldn't be obscure. It's a TV series of the most famous superhero in comic books outside of Batman.
Yeah.
You know, and there are times where Superman does take over Batman. You know, it doesn't happen very often anymore, but occasionally Superman is more famous. Anyway, but yeah, he's talking to camera, and I just think it's a really great moment. Like every time Metallo did that, I just loved it. Anyway, moving on to the next scene. I do think it's really cool, like with the directing, like Richard J. Lewis. I'm going to keep name checking him because I think he deserves props for this episode. But when Superboy and Metallo have that like sort of a standoff, and there's a bit of distance, and Metallo's got his cigar, and a literal fucking tumbleweed blows by, I love that. You know, the director was clearly just having an absolute blast shooting, like making this episode. The fact that they actually had a tumbleweed blow by, I have to know if that was in the script or if that was something that was added later.
Well, Mr. Carlin, if you're watching,
yeah,
which you do.
Yeah, if you could let us know.
Yes.
Did you write that in, or was that something that Richard Lewis like brought into it? Yeah.
Because it really, putting that there. I mean, yes, it's a throwback to the old westerns, but that whole scene is just like the old showdowns in the westerns.
Yeah. You have like the just the framing of those shots is the same. Like you have like the wide shots, you have like the low angles, so it's like the face-off type thing. You have the close-up is like Metallo's like smoking his cigar. It's like, you know, every western you see, like you have the close-up of Clint Eastwood's face, and he usually is smoking a cigar, I imagine. You know,
yeah.
For some reason, I always picture him with a cigar. So
it's actually a cigarillo. So
same thing, just smaller. Close enough. But yeah, you can see the influence in that scene, and it's just a joy to watch. I think it's one of the absolute best moments of this episode. Yeah, absolutely just phenomenal. I will say, though, that I do think even with all of Metallo's new upgrades, it's clear that the military was still holding back a little bit so they could potentially stop him when needed. But obviously they underestimated Metallo, as I think a lot of people tend to do. He's a lot more dangerous than he first appears because he does look a little bit laughable. But no, Metallo will fucking kill you, you know?
Yeah.
Even if you're the doctor trying to help him, he'll slash your throat. Like Metallo, never underestimate, Roger Corbin, because he will take you out. But I also think it's worth a mention. I think it's really cool that the bank that Superboy was robbing when Metallo shows up is the same bank that he caught Metallo robbing in Metallo's first episode. It's the same bank. I love that. I know it's probably just that's the bank they had access to, but I like to think that Superboy did it on purpose because I even though he didn't know Metallo was coming for him, I just think it's really funny that it's the same bank.
Yeah.
Really great little detail there that I think is worth mentioning. I do have a question for you, though, because in the next scene, it's revealed that Metallo not only has his money because Superboy had to flee, so Metallo just robbed the bank himself, which is great. But is it wrong that I actually feel kind of happy to see Metallo immediately got his babes back? Like he always seems so much happier when he's got a beautiful woman on each arm. But he's kind like Metallo. He's kind of a piece of shit, but for some reason I'm happy for him. I'm just like, well, he's probably going to go back to prison soon. Let him enjoy himself with a couple of like beautiful women for a while. Like, I can't begrudge him that. I can't help but be happy for Metallo in that moment because even though he's evil, he's likable as well. Even though I didn't want him to succeed, I was like, okay, give him a break once. Give him one little break. Yeah, let him hang out with his women for a while. I'm sure he wasn't getting conjugal visits in that hospital bed because he can't move.
Yeah.
He said he can't even stand. I think he says at one point he's carrying too much hardware or something. I think that's how he refers to it.
Yeah, and he said I can't even change the channel on the TV.
Yeah. So if he got his babes back at that moment, he wouldn't be able to do anything. So it would be like torture.
Yeah.
Maybe that's how they should have attempted to rehabilitate him. Just be like, if you weren't such a piece of shit, you'd be able to do something right now. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm being silly now, but I do think that whole scene, the fact that Metallo's got his babes back, makes the next scene so much funnier, because the next scene is Clark seeing Metallo on TV, who's taunting him about thanks, pal, for making the bank so easy for me to rob and all this. And Clark's just like, that's my money, and he's like muttering to himself, he's like, money, like babes, and he's just like, he decides he wants the same. So it's funny that Superboy immediately is just like, wait, if Metallo's got beautiful women, I better go find Lana. And it takes what is quite a humorous scene, but then the next scene when Superboy actually shows up in Lana's room, like, he's genuinely intimidating. Like when he's got the fish and he almost kills the fish, and just seeing him like talk to Lana that way and treat her that way and like get physical with her and stuff, like, it's actually genuinely shocking.
Yeah.
I think the fact that it went from a humorous scene to that scene is so jarring that it actually had more of an impact for me. I don't know if that was intended, but it works for me anyway.
Yeah. I think there's kind of an underlying reason why he went and got Lana. It wasn't just the fact that, oh, she's easy access and she likes me anyhow. I think that even though he is quote unquote evil, thanks to the kryptonite, I think there's still enough good Superboy in him, enough of what Ma and Pa raised, to make him realize Lana is the only one who can bring me out of this. So maybe deep down he grabbed her because he knew she'll get me out of this. She'll help me.
It's an interesting way to look at it, definitely. Because I hadn't considered that, but I think you could be right.
Yeah, because, I mean, think about it. At the end of the episode, who's the one who brings him out of it?
Lana.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we will get to that scene as well, because I do have a couple of notes on that scene, but we'll get there when we get there, obviously. But that scene where he's treating Lana so miserably in her bedroom, like, really shocking. I think it's actually Stacey's performance that really sells that scene. Like, Gerard's doing a good job, don't get me wrong, but I think if Stacey wasn't acting her absolute heart out in that scene, I don't think it would have worked quite as well, because she's playing it like she's in like a Oscar-winning like drama about like domestic abuse or something. Like, she's playing it totally real, and she like Stacey always brought everything to these scenes, and this is just one of her best, in my opinion, even though she's not even the focus of the scene, but she still is just like acting circles around everyone else. And that's not saying anything bad on Gerard's performance. He's very good in this scene. I just think Stacey is just so much better. But
for all we know, she could have had a friend or a family member who went through an abusive relationship, and she was just drawing from that to do it.
Maybe, or maybe she's just that good. Maybe she's just that talented at acting. Who knows? But I know those are the sort of scenes that tend to get played a lot when you're at like acting school and stuff like that, because obviously they always pick the most dramatic stuff to get you, well, I guess just to prepare you for the industry. But anyway, Superboy shows up at the bar with Lana, and Metallo's there drinking with his babes, and I just think it's a really wonderful scene. It's a very short scene in the bar, but the way that the friendship forms between Metallo and Superboy in that scene, I just think is played brilliantly. Like, it's very short, but it covers a lot of ground, and everything Superboy and Metallo is saying is rooted firmly in the characters. Like, Metallo, like, the main thing he's interested in is, like, do you think they can even upgrade me, make me even stronger? And, like, Superboy obviously just wants to get him there so he can trick him. Like, it's just part of his plan.
Yeah.
But Metallo actually thinks, like, maybe I can actually get even more upgrades out of this deal if I team up. It's just a really great scene.
He's definitely playing on Roger's ego here.
Definitely. I mean, the first thing he does is, steal a bottle of booze and say this is for you as a gift. It's just like Corbin at the whole point is like he you can tell that he doesn't quite know what to say and do in that scene. But as soon as he realizes Superboy's there to team up with him, he trusts him almost immediately, which is, I guess, I don't know. It's a little bit stupid, a little bit naive, but I don't know. Metallo's never been the smartest.
But then again, if you look at what happens later, you know, when Superboy turns the tables on him at the lab, Metallo says, "You double cross me. I was going to double cross you."
Yeah.
You know, so
you know, maybe it's naivete a little bit, but yeah, I think you're right. I think he's playing along, and I think even Superboy probably knew he's playing along, but Superboy knew enough to know that it wouldn't matter in the end. Just a really fantastic thing, and who doesn't love the scene when they show up at the military base together and they're just cracking jokes and complimenting each other, and it's just like, after you, pal. And it's like, oh, thank you. It's like, no, don't mention it. Anything for a friend. And it's just like, just these really cool back and forths. I just think it's one of the best, if not the best scene in the episode. Very little happens until like the tank shows up and they just dispatch it very, very quickly, which is another thing. I love how easily Superboy takes down that tank. Like, he's not even trying. Like, he's not putting in any effort whatsoever. It shoots him. He's just like that. Just walks over, stuffs it in the thing, walks back, boom. And it's just like, it really highlights the fact that, you know, the fact that he took it out so easily and was barely even trying. It's just like, if he wanted to take over the world, he easily could. Like, it explains how the Sovereign has been able to grab power and keep it. You know, if it wasn't for Lana with her kryptonite suicide vest later on, like, the Sovereign probably would have just ruled over Earth forever, depending on how long that particular version of Kal-El lives on Earth.
Right.
I imagine it's still a few hundred years at least.
Oh, but, definitely.
Yeah, I just think it's a really, really great scene in every way. There's nothing about that scene I would change. I think it's just okay, mate. Actually, I would probably add a few more tanks, but that's just a budget thing, you know. If I could add anything, it would just be more money for the episode.
More money for the episode, you know, more tanks, you know, actual armed guards, you know.
And I will also say, if there's one more complaint that I have about this episode, is that it's not a two-parter, which is the same complaint I always make about these episodes when they're this good, but there's still only one part. Just purely because I think I just want even more scenes of the friendship between Metallo and Superboy. I think those scenes are just so much fun to watch. I could have stood to watch another 10-15 minutes of that easily.
Yeah,
I think
one complaint that I have, and this is kind of an important complaint.
Mm.
Obviously, this is in the Daily Planet that he's gone rogue. Where's Ma and Pa? Why are Jonathan and Martha not calling the dorm to see what's going on?
That is so true. I hadn't even thought about that. There should have at least, if it was a two-parter, Ma and Pa, like, or at the very least, Pa would have driven to Schuster to confront his son. Like, he maybe even would have been there instead of Lana, maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's just a time issue. But yeah, if they'd made it if it was a two-parter, they could have done that. They could have done the whole friendship between Clark and Superboy and Metallo. Like, there's I guess if the only real complaint about this episode though is that we just kind of wish there was more of it and they'd done more things, that's kind of it's kind of a good complaint to have, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, there's some episodes of this where I'm just like, I would happily just erase this episode from canon entirely, especially in season 1.
Yes.
But yeah, this is one of those episodes where I wish it was 2, maybe even 3 parts, because I think this is the kind of story where you easily could have filled 3 episodes without even having to try very hard, because it's just such a it's just such a great place to start a story from. There's just too many possibilities, Anyway, we get into the actual facility, and Superboy's plan to turn Metallo's kryptonite red is great. The fact that he pretended to befriend him just long enough until Metallo was at a vulnerable place, and it's set up earlier in the episode when Metallo says, like, you can't pull this chunk of green rock out of me this time. Like, the army's put this thing on it. The only time this opens is when I want it to, or something like that, wasn't it?
Oh, what are you doing? You trying to steal my thunder? Huh? Hey, forget it. Thanks to Uncle Sam, I'm new and improved. This kryptonite's not going anywhere unless I say so.
That just set up that Superboy can't take out Metallo in the same way he did last time. So even while he's under the influence of red kryptonite, he's still pretty smart, and he works out another way to take him down. And I just think it's a really clever plan.
Yeah, that is one of the best things about Superman, or Superboy in this case. One thing that most modern writers forget: he may not be a genius, he may not be Lex Luthor quality intelligence, but he is smart, and he thinks his way through things. And the fact that he was sitting there thinking, okay, he's got kryptonite, he's been upgraded, I can't remove it. How can I take him down? Got it.
Yeah, and it works. It's a good plan. It makes sense for the story. It's pretty much the only thing he really could have done in that scenario, and it just works. I think it's great. It's a good plan. It works, and it does mean that Superboy, for a moment, is kind of unopposed now, because nobody can stop him, because he's just taken out Metallo, essentially. But then obviously Lana shows up just in the nick of time, and she has this brilliant plan. Like, she knows Superboy well enough to know that he can't kill, and she's like banking on the fact that she believes that even under the influence of Red K, that he still wouldn't be able to do it.
Right.
And they do say in the episode that Lana basically just what's the word? Distracted him long enough for the second dose of red kryptonite to cure him. But I don't know, this is just my headcanon, but I don't think the second dose of red kryptonite would have worked on its own. I think Lana's contribution is a little bit understated in that.
Yeah.
I think she's a big part of why it worked.
Yeah, and if you recall, General Swan, he tries to stop him and says, "We can help you, please don't." It doesn't work. He's trying to do the same thing. He's pleading with him. But Lana comes in and says, Go ahead, do it.
Kill him.
What are you, a coward?
Yeah, she uses reverse psychology on him.
It's great. She's basically pushing him to do it, and it kind of breaks through the influence of the red kryptonite in just this really brilliant way. I think, I don't think it would have worked just the second dose on its own. I think without Lana there, Superboy would probably just still be evil.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, it's one of those things that, okay, that's not what's said in the story, but that's the way I'm going to choose to think about it. And if we do another red kryptonite story in season 5,
I don't think a second dose of red kryptonite actually would have done anything. Because
I think if anything, it would have made him worse. Really?
Yeah,
it's like, when Clark's under the influence of kryptonite, if you were to bring a second chunk of kryptonite close to him, it's not going to heal him. It's going to make him die twice as fast.
Yeah, and my headcanon on the whole thing is it goes back to the Silver Age of red kryptonite stories. A specific, a chunk of red kryptonite has one effect on you once.
Once, and then it's a different effect the next time.
And that same chunk, if you expose him to it again, no effect. So I think
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that they established that in comics previous. That
I obviously missed that detail, but it's a good detail.
Yeah, I mean, more modern takes on red kryptonite is that the same chunk has a different effect each time. You know,
although technically Metallo did have a different chunk. When Superboy turns the one that was already in Metallo's chest red, technically that's a different chunk of red kryptonite, so it should have had an effect even if the other one didn't. So who knows?
Unless,
and Superboy says that he doesn't remember much of anything. Maybe that second chunk of kryptonite, all it did was erase some of his memories. Like there's precedent for that in the comics.
yes,
Losing his memory on red kryptonite is,
it's like that Sally Selwyn story that we were talking about a few weeks ago.
Yeah, it's great. I like amnesia stories, and I think it worked, and it's interesting. Yeah, when we talked about it, obviously it was during our one story 3 times. It was during that mini series we did, and it would not surprise me the writers of Superboy Lost were pulling from those comics at least a little bit. But it's always nice when comic book stuff gets, or at the very least, when stuff feels like it's pulled from the comics. It doesn't always have to be, but I think the ending with the red kryptonite is an example of that, because who knows? Maybe the second chunk of red kryptonite, all it did was account for why he lost some of his memories. Maybe the second chunk, it just happens that chunk did happen to cure him. Maybe that's the random effect of that chunk. Who knows? But it's one of those things that I always think is interesting to think about. But this episode obviously ends with something that we have talked about before as well. The fact him smiling, holding the red kryptonite. I do think that's something I really, really wish had come back. I think we were talking about, what was it? It was our episode where we talked about storylines that were set up but never paid off. It was months ago, but we did talk about that as one of the examples. I really wish that they had done that, even if it was just an issue of the tie-in comic. I don't know. I think it would have been fun to have a red kryptonite powered Metallo story, even if it turned out by the end that red kryptonite loses its power over time, so he can't use it as a permanent replacement or something. That could have been an interesting way to do it, but it could have been, they could have done a story where Metallo has another chunk of red kryptonite, tries to expose Superboy to it, but it has a completely different effect this time. Like, that could have been a fun story. But
going with that, him trying to expose him to red kryptonite again, I don't think Metallo would be that stupid. Because, given what he knows
maybe
already,
somebody else steals the red kryptonite.
But would we really want to try and expose him again, thinking that the only effect it has is turning him evil? It's
not a great setup for a story, but I'm sure, the writers of Superboy and the tie-in comic, they're considerably more talented than I am. So I'm sure they could have come up with something, even if I can't. But it would have been nice to have that pay off a little bit more. But all in all, though, this is my favourite Metallo episode of Superboy. I do like, obviously, his introduction, and even the People versus Metallo I have a soft spot for, even though it's kind of a clip show.
I mean, that's definitely a clip show, but it's one of the better clip shows.
Yeah. It's like with Stargate SG-1 when they would do clip shows. It would always actually have an effect on the ongoing story arc. Like it wasn't just a throwaway. You can't skip the clip shows because you will miss information that's important for the episode after. And I think People versus Metallo is an example of a clip show done right. But this is my favourite episode. SuperMenace, to me, granted, I know that we are going to do what we did in the last episode, but we'll give it a score out of 10. But for this scale, I should say we should count it out of 10, but specifically for season 2. So I would give this a 9.5, which is the same score I'd give Roads Not Taken, but they are vastly different in terms of quality. I think Roads Not Taken is a much better episode, but I'm judging it purely on the scale of season 2. And this is my favorite season 2 episode as well.
I would agree with you on that. I'd give this a 9. I'd give this a 9.5 on this because given what we've dealt with on season 2 already. I mean, yes, we have 2 really great episodes. I mean, the Bizarro 2-parter.
Fantastic. They are close in terms of my listings of favorite. Like, it is close, but SuperMenace just beats it for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's some good episodes in season 2. I just think this is possibly the best, or at the very least, it's my favorite. But yeah, I don't know. Is it your favorite, or do you maybe have a different one that you prefer over it?
Well, it's lumped in with my favorites of season 2. I mean, obviously, I love Yellow Perry, and I know we disagree on this.
Obviously, we know why, though, we disagree on it, because you actually have experience reading Yellow Perry in the comics, and I don't.
Yeah.
So you already had a soft spot for that character, which I think is fair enough.
Look at Elizabeth Kiefer in that costume. Come on.
I can't argue with that. She looked stunning. I even think she's pretty when she's playing, the sort of geeky version of her character. She's never unattractive in that episode. It's the Hollywood thing, isn't it? They take a stunning A-list actress who could be a supermodel, and they just like ruffle up her hair and put her in glasses and say, "Oh, she's nerdy now. Nobody should find her attractive." It's like, no, she is still stunning. It makes no difference that she's wearing glasses. But that's just a thing with Hollywood in general, isn't it? It doesn't matter what project it is. At some point, that happens, and it's just silly.
Yeah, I mean, there's that one. I mean, I also love the Bizarro 2-parter. No question about that.
Yeah, just awesome.
Talking
of Bizarro. Whoop, whoop.
It looks good, Tom. It looks good.
Thank you. I'm quite pleased with the bottom half of it is all some of the lines have come off. I am getting it retouched, but when they did it, they said there was a chance of that, so I always knew I was going back in.
Yeah,
but, the face I'm happy with.
Yeah, Superboy's Deadly Touch. I also love that.
Love that episode. The beginning of that episode when you've got Lex and Darla like pretending to be nuns.
The only part about that really always annoys.
He should recognize them, I know, but
Darla, no,
we've explained that. But Lex, all Lex is doing is wearing a nun's outfit and a little pair of glasses. But should we just explain that away as in the DC universe? If you put on glasses, nobody will recognize you because it works for Clark. I don't know. Maybe it's just one of those things that we have to just let go, I guess.
Yeah.
It works for Clark.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been so much better if they'd gotten an older actress who's about the same build as Sherman Howard to play the nun, and then all of a sudden, right after Superboy is knocked out, do the whole Mission Impossible face reveal.
Yeah, and that's we have talked about this before. Although I don't remember if that one was released. That might have been in the episode where the recording messed up and we lost it. But, Lex is kind of a master of disguise in the comics, in the Silver Age at least. It doesn't happen all the time, but there is precedent for it. So Lex using makeup would have been fine. He could have had a false nose and all of that stuff. That would have worked. Wouldn't have to be a full face mask, just a false nose. He's wearing glasses. Maybe he could put on some dentures or something, so he's got like one of his teeth is turned blue or something. So it's, little details to distract the eye. That it could have worked like that, but I still love that episode. A mole would have been great. It's a great episode, but you're right that scene is a little bit strange. But it doesn't bother me that much. Yeah. It's still a fun episode.
Yeah, I mean,
it's full of really cool practical effects, like when Clark is holding that can of soda and it starts bubbling and boiling. Obviously it's not CGI; it's a practical effect, and it really works. It's fantastic. great episode. Maybe at some point we'll do, when we finish this spotlight series on Metallo, we are going to do a spotlight on other villains as well, such as obviously Mixus Pitlick and Bizarro, and we will be doing Luther at some point. Although I imagine that one will be split up over considerably longer, considering just how many episodes he's in.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I think Lex had the most appearances in seasons 3 and 4, because if you look at season 1, 4 episodes, season 2, 3.
Yeah, which is crazy that they get a better actor for Luther and then actually use him less often that season. But who knows? Maybe at one point they didn't know if they were going to have to use Scott Wells, so they didn't want to write too many episodes. We don't know when the idea to have him take over the face of Warren Eckworth came in. Maybe who knows? Maybe it was kind of late in the process.
Yeah,
I doubt it, but it's possible. We don't know nearly enough about the schedule of the production to really say. But
plus, this season 2 was the season of introducing more supervillains, more actual threats.
Yeah.
Granted,
I guess as well they wanted to see who would be popular. Obviously they must have guessed that Metallo would be popular, since they didn't even wait until the end of the season to bring him back. So that's great. Obviously they didn't do that with Bizarro. I think it could have been fun to have Bizarro return somewhere towards the end of the season for one more episode. I would have liked that.
I would have liked that better than doing the woman called Tiger Eye. Ugh.
I mean, I still can't get over the fact that that's the season finale, and it's by far one of the worst episodes of the season, if not the worst. I mean, it's up there. It may not be the worst thinking about it, but it's close.
Yeah,
it's not a good episode at all. But anyway, 9.5 out of 10 for SuperMenace on the season 2 scale, as I say.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much for watching. I do hope you've enjoyed this second of our Metallo spotlights. And next month we'll be doing the next Metallo episode, which is the People versus Metallo, I'm guessing.
Yes.
Yeah. I couldn't, for some reason at that moment, I couldn't remember if there was another one between them, like Threesome or something. But I think that's season 4.
Yeah, Threesome is season 4, along with.
I know he's. I'm trying to think what else he's in. I think it's just Threesome that Metallo's
Threesome,
in.
and then Obituary for a Superhero.
Yeah, we're not really going to count that. When we do our spotlight on Threesome, we're just going to talk about his appearance in Obituary for a Superhero at the end, because there's not nearly enough Metallo to actually make that episode worth discussing.
Yeah, and then of course the last part to our Metallo, we'll have to wait until we get to the end of the series.
Yeah,
the tie-in comic.
Yeah, we don't want to skip ahead. We're enjoying reading the tie-in comic in order, so apologies that one will take a little bit longer, but it'll be a different format anyway. So yeah, thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to tune in again next week, where we will be likely doing a commentary on either the episode A Day in the Double Life, or possibly we'll go for something from season 1, because we don't visit season 1 very often, so that could be fun. Thank you all again. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, leave us some comments. If you have any requests for commentaries or even just topics for the podcast, let us know. We love taking requests. We always do our best with them. Goodbye.